As many of you know, the Hunt Institute was created several years ago through a philanthropic donation from the Hunt Family Foundation to the University of Texas at El Paso. The primary consideration for this gift was the economic conditions in El Paso and more broadly the Paso del Norte region. The other consideration for this gift was the absence of a regional or systematic approach to the collection and dissemination of data and other practical resources that can be deployed to generate value for the city of El Paso and its various communities. Over the past 4.5 years, the Hunt Institute at the University of Texas at El Paso has been developing strategic data and regulatory resources for the benefit of the stakeholders in the region, whether in the public sector or the private sector. Today's presentation is an opportunity to share with all of you here at the City of El Paso the reach and extent and the value of our work and how it can be of value to your constituents and the people of El Paso. Fundamentally, economic development is a question of developing value. How can you convince people to invest in something versus something else? The Hunt Institute departs from this principle and tries to show the value and the assets not only in El Paso, but more broadly in New Mexico and Chihuahua as well. The principal constraint for economic development in our region is a geographic location. We are quite far from water. We are quite far from the West Coast ports. We are far from the Gulf ports. And we're far from the Atlantic and the Midwest ports as well. At the same time, we are strategically located between all of these principal ports and principal markets. We are midway between Chicago and Los Angeles. We are between Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Chihuahua, and Mexico City. We are between Los Angeles and the Gulf ports in Texas. And that means that we have a strategic value, but it also means that this territory is quite contested. As you can see also, the principal challenge of economic development in our region is the geography. This is a very mountainous region, and for any of you who have been down I-10 at rush hour going through Sunland Park curve, understand that anytime that the road bends, it slows traffic down. So whether we're Union Pacific, BNSF, or even going to pick up our children or go to a meeting, things slow down when they have to go through the mountains. So given those obstacles, what is the solution? The other thing I was mentioning is this question of our strategic value and the disputation that arises from that strategic value. Over time, from the Spanish times to the Mexican Empire to the United States, people have desired this territory due to a strategic value. In Albuquerque, they have a transcontinental passageway from Chicago in the Midwest down to Long Beach in Los Angeles. And here in El Paso, that goes from Long Beach all the way to Texas. This is the 32nd parallel. Over time, and more recently, this region we've seen under great conflict due to the trade routes for narcotics, human trafficking, other kinds of smuggling, going from Mexico into the United States. So there's no doubt that our region is strategic, but the question is, how do we marshal this strategic value to the benefit of our citizens? The other issue with a divided region is that all of our systems are governed differently. New Mexico has different tax regimes than Texas does, as does Mexico. City government, local government in New Mexico, Texas, and Chihuahua is all governed differently as well. How does a person or a small business in our region sell, market, and sell their goods across the region? It's quite challenging. So the response to this is to create a platform that is accessible and practical and for use not only for the average person, but for the representatives here in City Council, for the mayor's office when we have questions of legislative priorities or other things that affect our constituents. The way that we've divided this platform is into 4 sections. The first are data resources. The second is dynamic and static maps. The third is strategic sector reviews. And the fourth is economic impact modeling. With respect to data resources, as I was mentioning earlier, our markets are limited because we don't really always have a grasp of what the indicators or the data is on the other side of the border. It's quite easy to get data for El Paso, for West Texas, or for Texas more broadly. But where do I get the data for New Mexico? Where do I get the data for Juarez? If we have a question of water, if we have a question of employment, if we have a question of tax rates, where do I get that? Well, the Hub Institute has created a one-stop shop. Many of you are familiar with this with respect to business registration and other kinds of activities. We try to put all the data in all these key sectors in one place on our website so that it could be viewed by anybody, whether they're in New York, Los Angeles, or Picton. The other thing that we've done is we've created a selection of strategic site selector databases based on harmonized indicator categories from the International Economic Development Council. We have a comprehensive database, again, available on our website for Albuquerque, Las Cruces, El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, and Chihuahua, all around what was once known as the Camino Real. If we can leverage and work together across assets and across jurisdictions, our economy and therefore our economic development would be much stronger. As you can see here, this is an example of the contents of those strategic site selector databases, just giving at one glance the indicators that they contain. The other thing that we've done is we've visualized many of those indicators with some interactive data tools, whether it's with respect to commuter flows, whether it's respect to investments or other kinds of activity that are happening, again, at a regional cross-border level. We have also employment indicators by occupation in El Paso and Doñana County to present a more holistic view of what's happening regionally and not just in one city or another. The other area that I'm most excited about is our mapping capacities. And these are available for your viewing on our website at any time. One of the things that we've done is we've created GIS asset maps for aerospace, mining, and energy. These are traditionally value-added sectors for the Paso del Norte region and for El Paso in particular. But in the creation of these maps, we learned that there's a lot of divergences or even lack of awareness of the complementarity of assets. Just to share a humorous anecdote with you, when I went to Albuquerque to talk to the Aerospace and Aviation Association about creating this map, I told them that there were a lot of assets in El Paso and Chihuahua City. And they looked at me and they said, Chihuahua, we didn't know that there was aerospace activity going on in Chihuahua. So it's just to underline that in many ways, our economic development and the creation of value in our region is limited by lack of knowing what is in proximate but separate markets, such as New Mexico and Chihuahua. So if you look at this map, you can click on these assets. And for example, I can't see there, I'm not sure which one that is. That is Raytheon. So what we've done is we've created assets that you can click on and view in this map. And they're color-coded as well across industrial, research and design, launch facilities, and academic institutions as well. So any of those institutions that have anything related to aerospace, aerospace manufacturing, aerospace design is put on that map, all the way from northern New Mexico through southern Chihuahua. So this is just a screenshot of one of those examples. It includes the name of the company, it includes the contact information, it includes the NAICS codes, it includes the processes and the capabilities, as well as other strategic information. And that information is associated with all those pins and assets that you see across that map. That way, whether you're a city representative or whether you're an investor, you'll be able to see not only with a broad overview, but with specific practical understanding what is available in the area. This is the mining sector map, and this map has gone, actually been extended through Colorado all the way to Durango. And you can see here there is a description of one of the mining activities there here in southeastern New Mexico, the name of the company, the NAICS codes, and other pertinent information. This gives us an idea, again, of what's happening in our region and how we can leverage these assets collectively. The other thing that we've done is a renewable energy and a hydrocarbon energy asset map as well. And if you see here, this is a description of one of the companies here in the area, Earth Energy Electric. But the other thing that we've done with this map that we've not done with mining or aerospace is to map the base layers of the Bureau of Land Management, the State Land Office, and in both New Mexico and Texas, as well as other governmental facilities. Because in many cases, renewable energy development in our region is constrained by the ownership of the land upon which the renewable assets lie, whether it's solar, wind, or geothermal. Now, we also have a series of static maps that are also quite valuable in terms of economic development and attracting investment. This is one of the first maps that we created. It's a map that is meant to highlight the regional unity of the Paso del Norte, the familial history, the commercial history. You'll see here that the borders are diminished in favor of the regional proximity. And in the lower left-hand and lower right-hand corners, you can see that we placed the Paso del Norte in relationship to the state capitals as well as the federal capitals. Many people tell me, oh, El Paso, well, I'm going to be in Houston next week. Maybe we should get together for lunch. So I'm sure something similar has happened to you as well. So the idea is to really give everybody, whether in our region or Albuquerque or Washington, D.C., a better understanding of who we are and how valuable we are as a community and how the resources we have here really outmatch anybody else in a great distance. This is just an update of that map that we published recently. Now, with respect to strategic sector reviews, what we do here is we take a certain area that is of vital significance to the Paso del Norte region, and then we do a regulatory and quantitative analysis of that sector. So the first thing that we did was just an economic indicator review. And these are, again, just screenshots. All of this is publicly available. If you ever suffer insomnia, I encourage you to spend time on our website and just get into the details. But this here, for example, in the upper left-hand corner is a regional comparison of employment indicators across the region. Now, again, this is difficult because on the US side, the indicators are harmonious. They're basically using the same methodology and the same definitions. But on the Mexican side, all indicators, not all indicators, but many indicators are calculated and defined differently. So how can we speak to investors? How can we speak to governments? How can we speak to people outside the region with one voice if our indicators and our data is measured differently? So here is the attempt to harmonize those indicators to create a regional unified understanding of what we have to offer. What we did last year was a energy sector review. I'm sure many of you have had a chance to look at it. But what I'm showing here is just a series of maps as well as other graphs that may be of interest to you. This is a combined mapping of the crude oil and refined oil pipelines. Now, the interesting thing about this, again, is that there exist maps of the US system and maps of the Mexican system, but there don't exist maps that display simultaneously the US and the Mexican systems. Now, also what's important about this is to know how essentially dependent Juarez is on crude and refined oil from the Permian Basin flowing through El Paso into Ciudad Juarez. The refineries in Mexico are located in the southeast, very far from Juarez. So that means that everything that uses diesel or any kind of petroleum product in Ciudad Juarez depends on the refineries and the oil that comes out of West Texas, such as the trailer fleets, which is of vital significance to our community. Now, this is a combined map of the natural gas pipelines. So it's not just a question of the cities in northern Mexico depending on crude and refined oil from West Texas. It's also a question of electricity and the natural gas that's used to develop that electricity in Mexico. And as you can see here, what is in orange are the natural gas pipelines under construction, and what is in blue are the natural gas pipelines that are already operating. And if you can see more closely, we've even identified the companies that own those pipelines. So from an economic development point of view, just as with the GIS sector maps, the city or the investors or the private sector here in the region can identify those companies that are active here and reach out to them in order to leverage those investments. So you'll see here in the top of the map how the natural gas pipelines are now flowing through our region to off-takers in northern Mexico. Why is this happening? As we all know, industry in Mexico has moved north towards the border over the last 30 years to take advantage of its proximity to the US markets as well as the free trade provisions in NAFTA. That means that places like Ciudad Juarez are using a lot of electricity. What we'll see here in a minute is that Mexico has some of the highest electricity rates of all developing or developed countries in the world. So in an effort to lower electricity prices and increase the competitiveness of industry in Mexico, including Ciudad Juarez, the government is moving towards a natural gas-based production system for electricity. So that means that Ciudad Juarez, as well as other northern Mexican cities, are going to need a lot more natural gas. Where are they going to get it? Mexico doesn't have a lot of natural gas deposits. Who does? The Permian Basin. How are they going to get the gas from the Permian Basin to northern Mexico through this region? So again, it goes back to that geographic strategic orientation that we have as a community and as a city. We also did renewable energy maps, and you can see here that we are blessed with high degrees of solar radiation, but relatively few generating facilities for solar energy. These are all the solar energy facilities in the region, as well as their capacity and the companies that own those generating facilities. We did the same for geothermal, and as many of you know, there's a lot of geothermal deposits around here, particularly out near the airport. But if you look there in the left-hand corner, or left side of the map, there's just one small geothermal facility in the entire region, and it's not very powerful. Now again, with respect to wind energy, a lot of the wind energy is booming in the ERCOT area of Texas. That has in many ways to do not just with the CREZ, but the regulatory distinctions between the El Paso Electric Service Area and the ERCOT service area. So if you see here, all the wind energy is going east to the load centers, to the markets in Dallas and Houston, but it's not going westward to El Paso. So while Texas is enjoying, as a whole, some of the lowest electricity prices in the country, El Paso has some of the highest energy prices, certainly in Texas. What we also did, again, going back to the comparative analysis, is we compared the price of gasoline across these jurisdictions. We did the same with diesel grade between Texas, New Mexico, and El Paso. We also did the same with natural gas prices. And it's interesting to note here that some of the most expensive natural gas is in Juarez. And the cost of living and the per capita income in, the per capita income in Juarez is much lower than it is in either Texas or New Mexico. Now, the other thing we did was we took a look at the electricity sectors. And again, going back to strategy and the maps and our strategic location. On the right-hand side of that map is the Eastern Interconnect. On the left-hand side is the Western Interconnect. And that big blue dot is ERCOT. And if you see where we're located not only at the juncture of North America's 3 central grids, but also the Mexican grid. So what kind of role and what kind of value could we develop here in terms of sending energy and electricity between those 4 grids there? This is a comparative view of the service area for El Paso Electric and Comisión Federal de Electricidad in Juarez, as well as with the generating stations and their capacity. We did an analysis of electricity prices for this is customers as well. We have here non-residential customers in the region. Those are commercial and industrial. We have here an analysis of how much those residents use in terms of megawatt hours, and the non-residential consumers use in megawatt hours. We also have here the prices, and this is the residential average prices. So you see that orange line refers to the Juarez prices, and the gray refers to El Paso Electric New Mexico service area, and the blue to the Texas service area. So it's these kinds of divergences in prices that are going to really make economic development at a regional level much more challenging. Because if you're in a small area, imagine you go into Walmart, but Walmart's divided into 4 sections, and each section has different prices, different methods, different governing rules than the other. You probably won't go back to that Walmart. So again, what we're trying to do at the Hunt Institute is not only show how these things diverge in our region, but try to find moments and opportunities to work together to create a unified economic development strategy. So here we have non-residential average real prices. So this is what I was referring to earlier in terms of the industrial rates in Ciudad Juarez. Now, many of us know, I mean, from hundreds of years, how important the relationship is between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. So if Ciudad Juarez is more competitive in terms of industrial costs and industrial pricing, then that means it's good for El Paso. So how can we lower then the energy prices for the industrial consumers in Ciudad Juarez? Here we have just an example of the top 10 customers in Ciudad Juarez and how much they're using and what kind of activity they're engaged in. Here we have a comparison of rates across the region. The thing we're working on now is we're working on a regional banking and finance review. So we're looking at, for example, this is deposits, the deposits in El Paso County, Doñana County, and Ciudad Juarez. We have here the El Paso County banking institutions and their primary regulators, the name of the institution, their deposits, and what percentage of deposits they hold for the entire county. We did that as well for Doñana, and you can see the number between El Paso County dwarfs significantly the deposits in Doñana County. We also have here Ciudad Juarez banking institutions and all of their deposits as well. Now we have here major banks by deposits in El Paso, top 5 in Doñana County, as well as the top 5 banks in Ciudad Juarez. And if you'll notice, there's no local banks present in Ciudad Juarez. There's only a few of the top 5 in Doñana County that are local, and only 2 here in El Paso that are local, but they're pretty much dominated by national corporate banking. We also have here the growth of deposits with respect to the business cycle in El Paso and Doñana County. And then we also compare El Paso to the other border communities. This is El Paso in the orange, and then we have Hidalgo County, Webb County, and Cameron County. We also did the same with New Mexico. So interestingly, even though El Paso has fewer deposits than other border communities in Texas, Doñana County is the leader with respect to its border communities or counties. We also did the same with Mexican cities banking, and we can see how far ahead Ciudad Juarez is in terms of deposits than other border cities in Mexico. Now, we also looked at alternative financial services. This is the use of remittances between the United States and Mexico. These are real remittances to border municipalities. Ciudad Juarez is not the leader. Real remittances to border cities in the rest of Mexico. Real remittances to Mexico at national level by type. Real remittances to the state of Chihuahua. They've been growing significantly over the last couple of years, as well as to Ciudad Juarez. Now, the other thing that we have available for the public is economic impact modeling. But just before I discuss that in a minute, in December, we gave a presentation to the Department of Homeland Security with respect to this banking and finance report. And so what we know about this region is not only that it is important to legitimate commerce and binational commerce, but it's also very important for illegitimate commerce. And illegitimate commerce has a very negative effect on legitimate commerce. So whether it's with drug trafficking, whether it's with money laundering, whether it's with other kinds of activities, the government wants to know about what's happening here. For any of you familiar with the region in Albuquerque, it's suffering a tremendous organized crime problem, and a lot of that organized crime activity originates in this border region. So how can El Paso, again, be of value not only to the US and the Mexico relationship, but to regional partners like Albuquerque, Texas, and Chihuahua with respect to its know-how and its strategic positioning. We have economic impact modeling with both the REMI model and IMPLAN, and many of you are aware that for the acquisition of funds or some kind of economic development investment, most people require an economic impact model. It's our ability to do that for you, and for the representatives here in the room, we also have the ability to do that by zip code for the IMPLAN model. So if there's something that you're interested in doing with respect to applying for a grant or applying for some kind of external funding, or even making the case for some kind of regulatory impact from the state level in Austin, we can help you determine that. The other thing that we have is we were appointed the technical secretariat for the Mexico-U.S. Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council in August. And this is a high-level binational council that brings together entrepreneurs and innovators from both the Department of Commerce, Department of State, as well as INADEM and other stakeholders in Mexico. And no other city has this except for UTEP and the Hunt Institute. So this is something that we can work with the city on. It's something that we can contribute this network to the Hub of Human Innovation, which the city is financing, as well as other private sector initiatives here in the region, like the Medical Center of the Americas, which also has a long-term agreement with the city of El Paso. So I'm just concluding here, but and maybe that all of that was a bit overwhelming. But the point that I made in the beginning and the point that I make here in the end is that our region, like many other border regions, are stranded at one end of a market, like San Diego, Tijuana, like Brownsville, Matamoros, like Laredo, Nuevo Laredo. None of these other border communities have anything like the Hunt Institute and its data and regulatory tools. So this is something very special for El Paso. It's something very special for the university, and it's something that the city and other stakeholders can really leverage to increase the creation of value and therefore really create a robust economic development environment. So with that, I conclude, and we'll take any questions.
Representative Schwarzbein. Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank Representative Anello for inviting Mr. Schaefer to come and present. This is really informative, really